everyone, to our Groundskeeper chat series. I am your host, Meg Kruger, and today I am joined by my co-host, Weston Appenfeller. He has been changing up the background on everyone for the last couple of episodes. So today I'm enjoying this one. It's very bright, no doom and gloom, no weathering the elements. So it's working for you. I like it. No comment.
Very HGTV background here.
Yes, yeah, it's very nice. And Weston is going to introduce our guest, so I'll pass it off to him.
Yeah. So our guest today, really exciting one for me. He comes to us from the great state of Texas, a legend in the industry. He retired a few years back from managing the fields at Texas A&M, and now works as a project manager for Sod Solutions. The one, the only, Mr. Craig Potts. Welcome to the show.
Hello, it's great to be here. I'm really
welcome.
excited about this.
Very cool. Are you Texas born and raised, Craig?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I just had to get that out of the way.
I am in my hometown. I haven't lived here all my life, but I'm pretty much most of it. Yes.
And we'll get to all the winding roads there in today's episode. But sorry, Weston, I stole your thunder. You get to kick it off with the first question.
You were good. So typically I started with the first question, which is, we are going to learn all about your work life and what you've done and where you've been and all of that. But can you tell us during that time or during the time now, what you like to do for fun? What do you do to get away from that work life? Who do you spend it with? And give us a little bit of insight into that.
Okay. I guess my favorite hobby would be playing golf. Okay. I don't do that near as much as I would like. And when I retired from A&M, I thought I would get to play a lot more golf, and that has not happened. But that would probably be my favorite hobby. I also like to fish. Once again, that doesn't happen as much. And I love watching college football on TV. That's something I really enjoy. And it's been unique because I guess this is probably the start of my third season since I've been at A&M. And I always would sit there, what you go into those jobs thinking that I want to be in sports, I want to be in turf grass. And what a better way to do that than to take care of athletic fields at a college, because you get every sporting event you could possibly want. You're not just limited to one sport. Mm-hmm. And so you're sitting there watching the games on the sidelines. You're involved with the team. When I first started, we were the equipment people as well. We loaded the equipment trucks. We did facilities. We did grass. And everybody, all your friends are like, you got the best job in the world. I would do anything for that job. And for the first 2 years, you're like, it is the best job in the world. And it really is the best job in the world. But by the same token, you're in there. Football game is a work day for you, and it's a long work day. And they're out there having this big party the whole time in the tailgating sections and all these things. So after 20 years or 25 years, you're like, boy, that tailgating section seems like a lot of fun. And you kind of forget about that. So once I retired, now it's more like, the easy chair is a lot better than fighting 107,000 people to get to a game. So it's a neat thing that I've enjoyed. Not only that, if I go to the game, I'm stuck watching one game. Well, if I'm in my easy chair, I can watch 7 or 8 at a time. So, I'm never watching commercials or I'm never watching anything else. I'm always just flipping from game to game. So that's been something. I have 3 kids, 3 girls. So I enjoy spending time with them. I think my favorite thing has always been to take them on vacations, to go on trips with my family. I guess that's the one thing that I am a trip planner, because, in the industry that we're in, we don't get a lot of time off. And so when we do, I want to have something besides just being at the house. I want to get out and go do something with my family, someplace fun. So that's something that I really look forward to.
Where have been some of your best... Yeah, I think we have the same question there. Yeah. Where are some of your best destinations or family trips that you guys have done?
I think obviously we've been to Disney more than once, probably 5 times, as a family, or 3 times as a family. I can't count how many times I've been there. But I think my favorite trip with the family was to Williamsburg. And because it was educational for them, going through all the history. I had one daughter that we were in a church in Williamsburg, and they were doing the tour of this church that's in there. And they were talking about all the famous people, George Washington and all these people that had attended that church. And so my daughter was probably 10 at the time, and she was really big into that stuff. So she's going in the pews and just sitting in each spot in the pews. And I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, well, I want to sit where George Washington would have sat. So she's like, I'm covering all my bases. So that was something that I really, really enjoyed. And I think it was because it was a lot of fun. And then we went up to DC and did a bike the sites type of deal where you just ride around DC and go to all the famous sites and get a tour there. So that everybody just had a blast on that trip. It was a lot of fun. So that would probably be the best one that we've done.
I myself have been to Williamsburg. I don't have as fond of memories as that experience. I remember it being so hot, and like my dad is the type of person that the tour guide would tell you, what happened at this place or the significance of the building, and he would be like, "Family, come here." He'd be like, "They're telling it all wrong. Let me tell you what actually happened here." You're like. So you're just like at odds the entire time. And he's still like that, where he'll make us all read the entire, fact sheet that's at the museum or the historical site. And then he'll tell you where the discrepancies are or what's, laying below the surface that we don't understand. And so those places were gruesome growing up, but beautiful scenery for sure.
Oh, yeah. And the one disappointment, because I had gone when I was younger, so that's why I wanted to take my kids there. But we were at Jamestown. That was the first thing we did, and then we didn't do that as well. So I have a regret of not spending more time in that section of it. But other than that, and then just going to Charleston and things to soak up all the history. That's just something that we've all we're pretty big in history in our family. So it's been a lot. Those are good trips for us.
Well, that's a very fitting segue to, our first question, which is really all about the history of Craig Potts. We want the full A to Z story. We got to hear a little bit of it at conference this year, and how your roots in agriculture and all that played a really big role in selecting this as a career. But if you want to take us back to the beginning and give us that fact sheet, I promise I won't point out any discrepancies or ways that you're telling it wrong. And give us that whole story for our listeners.
Okay. Well, Bryan College Station's technically where Texas A&M is actually at, but Bryan College Station are twin cities. So, they're just one big city essentially, but I live in Bryan. My father was born in Bryan. My grandfather was taught at he graduated. He's at Oklahoma State, got his master's at A&M, and I believe his PhD at Nebraska, came back to A&M. He was associate dean of agriculture at A&M. That's where he ended up retiring from. Okay. I mean, he started in the soil and crop science department. He started, and boy, I cannot tell you the year, but he did start the turf department at Texas A&M.
Oh, so cool.
So then he also was a founding member of the Texas Turfgrass Association, which my father was involved in, who actually was a president of the association. And then going back years after that, I became president. So there's been a lot of history in the Texas Turfgrass Association.
And legacy. How cool is that?
Yeah, it's a really neat deal. And so I have an initial, and I wish I could had it, but there's a picture of the first meeting that was in College Station, and there's my grandfather on the front row. So I think it's really neat to see that. So he was at A&M during the time that Bear Bryant and Junction and all that was there when Bear Bryant was coach. So they didn't have a field crew. I mean, I think probably the janitors or whoever painted the field. I don't really know the story on who was actually doing that kind of work, but they would use my grandfather to, give advice on how to grow the grass and things like that. And so he would actually literally walk the field with Coach Bryant and, try to help them prepare the field and get it ready for games and continue to grow the grass. And then later in his career, he got to be a consultant when they started to build the Astrodome. It's a new deal. We're going to build an inside stadium. We're going to have grass in it. So he consulted in that, and it actually worked pretty well from everything that I've read and the stories that he told me. But it was a giant greenhouse. Mm-hmm. And when you're trying to look up into the glass, into the sun, you have a glare. And so finding the fly balls were a challenge. Mm-hmm. So the solution is to kind of essentially paint the roof. Well, that shaded everything out. Hence, AstroTurf was founded a carpet to play indoor sports. Mm-hmm. But the initial concept worked. It was the other parts, the game part of it that didn't go as well as so much as the grass growing as well. But that was a unique experience, and I have some articles about that. But he retired 1977 from the ag department and then went into academics with the athletics. So he was involved with being an academic advisor for the, all athletes at Texas A&M. Football was one of them. And so then I got to be around a lot of the football players. Mm-hmm. Because of that. They would come fishing with us out of our lake that we have out in town. So I got to know some of these guys that actually played professional football. And it was funny. One of them was Tony Franklin, who was a kicker. He was a barefooted kicker. And back then they used the tees to kick off for, not kickoffs, but for field goals. They actually, instead of kicking straight off the ground, they would put a ball on the tee. And Tony was one of the barefoot kickers. So he kicked the ball with his bare foot and did the soccer style with his bare foot. Ended up playing for the Philadelphia Eagles. And I don't know how you can kick a ball barefoot in the winter in Philadelphia.
True that.
That's got to be something, but he did. And one day when I was working at A&M, this was probably about 10 years ago, and I'm sitting at a stoplight in my cart, and this guy pulls up to me at a truck, and I'm in a cart and he's in a truck, and he rolls down his window and he's like, "Hey, I'm Tony Franklin. I'm looking to get to some event at the football deal. It's like a reunion or something." And I'm like, "Well, Tony Franklin, I'm Craig Potts. I don't know if you remember going fishing and all that stuff." "Oh my God, you're
that's so cool."
It was really neat that, he still had that memory of all those times. And I was really impressed. And one thing that was neat is, like, I had the defensive coordinator living next door to me, and then across the street was the linebackers coach, so we all were, there's football going on in the street all the time.
Yep. Fully engrossed in it.
So I got to know a lot of the coaches and things before, and that kind of just made my interest. So now I had a turf grass interest, and I had the sport interest. My father, who going to Texas A&M, he was in soil and crop science as well. And they had an award, like, it's called King Cotton. And trust me, it has something to do with the Cotton Bowl, I guess. I don't know, but he won that. And then he also, while he was in college, bought some land and started a turf farm where he wasn't growing sod, but he was growing Bermuda grass for sprigs. Mm-hmm. And so he did that. And then when he graduated, he started a business where he had a nursery. So it was, they would do mums for the football games and stuff like that. But it was also a landscape contracting. So he was building golf courses, planting shrubs and things at malls, with a general line. And he still had the sod farm or the grass farm. So he would use he would sell that grass, but he'd also use it for golf courses. So he had Tiff Green, Tiff Dwarf, Tiff Way. Those were his three varieties at the time that he had out there. And so as probably growing up, that was my first real taste of starting to work for him. At 10 years old, we would do malls, and I would just be the one planting the Asiatic jasmine. And as I got a little older, I started working at the grass farm, being on the crew where we would sod cut like if we had to get sprigs, we would run a sod cutter over it, and then he had a verticutter that he would come in and just shred that. And that way, because it was a really, really sandy soil. And so you would get some soil in with the sprigs to help hold some moisture. So that was kind of something that he had developed. And so then we would literally pitchfork it into the back of a truck or something. Mm-hmm. So we'd have to rake it in piles and get pitchforks and throw it into the truck. So that's what I was doing. I was a pitchforker. But then as I got to high school, I was the person that would mow and then run all the irrigation pipes. So, I'd have to water for an hour and then move all the pipes, hook them up, and then reconnect it and then start over. So that was kind of my job, was to mow, keep it watered, do any roguing that needed to be done if there was any off types and things like that. And so that's where I developed my passion for the turf grass. And so when I went to A&M as a freshman, I'm like, well, I have this knowledge. I want to get some different knowledge. I thought, well, I'll start off in wildlife and fishery science. And that was because I like to fish.
Yeah.
That didn't really didn't take me where I wanted to go. And so the next year, I transferred to range science. So I'm like, okay, now I'm in range. I'm getting some grasses and I'm getting some wildlife, but the cattle part and all that, that wasn't really necessarily me. But I stayed in range. I graduated in range, but also being that I was in range, I still had to do all the same things that a turf grass was, soil science and all that. Mm-hmm. So every elective I took anything that a turf grass major had to take as far as turf grass, I took that. So I basically had that degree because everything else was the same. Mm-hmm. And I had a kind of a range grass part. And I worked for 3 years then at the turf grass field labs where they did all the research while I was in college. So I got a lot of experience in that. And I really, really enjoyed that. That was awesome. And so when I finally graduated, didn't take me but 4.5 years. So I went to,
that's a speed track these days. So.
Yeah, it was actually pretty quick. I didn't think I was going to get out though, but I barely made it. I went to, at the time it was called ChemLawn. So I went to Garland, moved to Garland, Dallas area, and had a route where I was treating lawns, fertilizing, doing all that. Up there, I got married. My wife decided she wanted to go to pharmacy school. So that was the University of Houston. So moved to Houston. They just transferred me down. And then True Green bought ChemLawn. And so we were True Green ChemLawn. So I worked 4 years in Houston, running the same route for 4 years. And it was the best experience I ever had. And I try to tell students when I do talks that it was one of the hardest jobs I ever had manually.
Okay.
I'd done manual labor all my life, but this was a
challenge. You were physically doing the applications?
Yes. I would have 40. I would have 30. They would give you a number. They would say, okay, you need to produce $5,000 in a week. So to be off on the weekend, I would have to hit X amount of dollars every day to get there.
Wow.
And so I would always try to front load. So Friday I would have to do, instead of 1,000, I'd say, oh, I got $700 that I got to do. Mm-hmm. But then you'd have a service call or something in there. And that was not fair because that was the stop that you had to make and you to get paid for,
Yeah.
And then the really crazy thing about it is they had a sales department. So they would hire all these people to do sales. And those people were on a commission, just like I got a little commission too for anything I overproduced on my weekly goal. Mm-hmm. But they were on the same type of commission. Well, they would pull up to a house and, I had several of these where it would be like an acre-sized lawn that I was getting. They've sold it for like $60. Well, it should have been $200 something bucks.
Yeah.
They got their commission, but I was having to produce that
to actually do it. Yeah.
It took me a lot of extra time and I wasn't getting some of the money off of it, but that wasn't, real frequent, but there were some of those. But yeah, it was something that you had, I'd been in turf grass, mainly Bermuda grass, but I'd been that all my life because even at our house growing up, we planted, I think it was Tiff Dwarf. So that's what we had. And we had a McLean mower. So literally I was mowing our yard pretty much every day, or at least every other day, because we had a putting green. So we had a 9-hole putting green in our front yard with the cups and the flags. And so it was
cool.
It was really neat because in the neighborhood, it was a popular place. Everybody would come, and we were having tournaments and, just all kinds of fun things about that. But going to Houston was great because my route was, I wouldn't say it was the older part. It wasn't technically in Houston. It was a memorial area. But anyways, so it had a lot of houses, beautiful big houses, but a lot of shade. And back then, brown patch was just a nightmare. They really didn't have a treatment for brown patch. You'd put down fungicides, but you were always called back because it never really did what it needed to do. And they had a lot of St. Augustine decline virus. And so, the worst thing for you is putting out weed control in shade on St. Augustine with the decline virus. And, plus the program was a fertility because everybody wanted a green lawn. And so you're probably technically over fertilizing in the long run for that situation.
Yeah.
And so it was something that I felt like really take each situation differently. And I learned, to educate my customers that I'm going to give you the best lawn, but maybe we don't do certain things in each situation. So I would do, instead of a blanket application of weed control in an area that was really heavy shade that has St. Augustine decline, I was put out a granular fertilizer. Maybe if they had gray leaf spot, treat that, and then do any spot treating for weeds, So I wasn't just constantly having, each lawn was different, but that was something that I really enjoyed. And then ProStar, a fungicide, came out, and it was the cat's meow. It just stopped brown patch in its tracks. And I'd go to customers that, this was like my second year that it came out, and they thought I was God. They're like, we've been trying to get this to stop forever. And I'm like, I didn't really do anything. It's just a new fungicide. But, it just worked. It was a godsend for us to have that product. And to this day, it's still, for that situation, I know there's a lot of other products out there, but it's still my favorite one.
The cat's meow. I like it.
But so really that happened. And then I guess we're going to continue in my history. Like I said, I worked there for 5 years, and then my wife graduated, did all that. And then she got a job in College Station at a pharmacy. So I moved back, and I went back and worked for my dad for like 6 months, about 8 months, just doing whatever he needed done. And then my boss at the Turf Field Labs, he got his master's, so he got promoted to teaching. So that job came open. So I went there and was like the manager over the field labs for about a year. And then that was in 95. So in 96, Kyle Field went from AstroTurf to grass. And the athletic director, who my grandfather knew, was good friends with, and I had sent him resumes, if you ever get something.
Yeah.
Well, and this is, I got to say, it has something to do with my grandfather. So I guess I was blessed and lucky to be in the situation I was in. But A&M's manager at the time was Leo Gertz, which we have a award at SFMA named after, and was probably one of I'm going to start crying, but he was just a great man, just an awesome man. Well, Mr. Groff had said, well, I have somebody that might be a good assistant, because at the time, the university there was artificial turf. So they had a grass baseball field, a grass softball field at the time, and they had just started soccer. But the university did all the work as far as the facility plant. So they would do the mowing, the fertilizing, and all that. Well, Leo's job really was to maintain the infield. That was really his job. and then oversee them doing that. And so we took it in-house, where all the equipment, everything. So that was the plan. So Leo hired me as his assistant, and I started January '96. And it was like my second day. He's like, okay, I'm leaving. Bye. He went off to SFMA or
Nice.
SMA at the time for the meeting. And I'm sitting there running practices with 2 student workers, and I'm having to figure out, this was my first experience with infield dirt, and I'm sitting there, and baseball's practice until 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And I didn't know any better. Well, I could go home, but I stayed and watched practices and all this. So that was a good learning experience for me, that he just kind of left me.
How long had Leo been there at that point? How long had Leo already been there?
He had started college no, that's not right. I was going to say 78. Yeah, that'd probably be about right. He was 7 years older than me. So he had probably been there
the definite
6 years, but he was, as a student manager, he started as just a manager of the baseball, and then Coach Chandler saw that Leo was really good. So he's like, well, we're going to put you out on the infield. And Leo was an ag eco major and had no experience either, but he just kind of taught himself everything and asked people that knew things. And so that's how he kind of got started. Man, I'm trying to remember what his first year was. But he worked under Billy Pickard, who was the trainer for Bear Bryant at Junction. And so Billy Pickard was there at the time, and he was still over training. He was over facilities, and he was over equipment. So Leo kind of went underneath Billy Pickard. And so he was kind of he got to the point where he was having to paint the artificial turf for the football games, because there was no inlaid. Everything had to be painted still. So he was basically just doing all that and still being the equipment manager for baseball.
So he trusted you no matter how long he had been there, day 2, to go out and run it yourself.
He didn't really have a choice. He was going no matter what. So my first year at STMA would have been '97 in Colorado Springs. So that was the first year I got to go to STMA, and I've been going ever since. So basically that was my job, was his assistant, the agronomic part of it. So, and I had to grow, I had to learn a lot of stuff, just kind of figure some things out on my own. And it was a learning curve for me, just the sports field and football, and trying to maintain grass and football versus maintaining it in my home lawn or home lawns. But that was kind of my role. And then I oversaw softball and soccer. So the agronomic part of it on all fields to a certain degree, and then day to day was softball and soccer. And we all had to do baseball and football. So the first probably 15 years of my career, I worked every sporting event at Texas A&M that had to do with softball, baseball, soccer, or football.
Wow.
And it was, that was just expected, because we didn't have enough crew to really say, well, somebody could be off, It's gotten a little more specialized, and the staffs have gotten bigger, so that has helped. But
really, I can imagine, Craig, that ran pretty parallel to when you guys were starting a family. I would just assume. Yeah. And how did that really work out? I mean, did you bring them along for a lot of it, or?
Unfortunately, I had 2 girls at the time, and they were not into sports until later.
Perfect storm.
Then I got one into soccer, and so that kind of changed once that happened. But no, I mean, at that time in my life, and I look back on it, and this is going to sound, I guess, in a way bad, but it's not meant to be. But I felt like I missed so much until they got into high school. Once they got to high school, that's when I kind of stepped back, and I'm like, what happened here? I missed all that. Because I mean, there was a lot of family trips that it was no dad around, my wife and her parents and her sisters and stuff like that, and the kids, but no Craig, just because it was assumed that you had to be at work. And Mr. Pickard was really good, but he had that, mentality that work is work, and, if we had a 6 o'clock kickoff at night for football, what time are we going to be here? I want y'all there at 7. So we would get there at 7 in the morning, you know, and I'm like, okay. But it was just something, I had that work ethic too. That was kind of the way I was brought up. So it didn't really hit me as anything, you know, it was just, that was part of it.
Well, for so long, you're right. It just was like ingrained in the culture that like, that was just the nature and no questions asked. This is the way that it's done. And I really think like, and maybe it was starting to make a transition before that, but definitely the pandemic changed things for so many industries in the sense of like, well, does it always have to be that way? Or, you know, how can we make that work-life balance a little bit, you know, more actually balanced instead of just, okay, we're not going to talk about that. Like, so no,
you know, I remember during the pandemic, it was like everybody was off, but we had to work, you know, I mean, because we still had to maintain fields and stuff, but we didn't have practice. So, you know, it'd be go in, mow, and then you go home, you know, it was just that. So it definitely showed you a different perspective of what life was about. And then at that time, my kids were in college, but they weren't in college. They were back at home. So it was actually, it was a good time in a way. I hate to say that, but it was a good time in a way because we got family time.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it did change perspective. And I think my perspective changed too, because Leo passed away, unfortunately. And so I was now no longer assistant. I was the head guy. In the first few years, I still kind of had that mantra. But then that's when...
What year was that, Craig?
I knew you were going to ask me that. It was 17, I think. 2017.
Okay. That sounds right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that was just a shock because I just remember being at work and getting a call. And I'm just like, because I thought it was odd, you know, because I hadn't seen him, and that was totally unusual. But it wasn't unusual for him to not, you know, to go run errands and stuff. So I just didn't really think too much about it, obviously. But yeah, that was just it was my birthday as well, and I was just like, oh my God, this is the worst thing. I love the man. So
and to take over in that way, I can't imagine the uphill battle, not only for you personally, but then also to lift up a crew in that kind of situation. I can't even imagine what you were up against there.
It was a shock. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, the other thing is I had never done a eulogy before, you know, and here I'm having to come up with that too. And that was just something that I wasn't prepared for, you know, because I was like, I'm going to get through this. Trying to do that. And, you know, it wasn't like he was just some guy. He was Leo Gertz, you know, the whole world knew Leo.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think 2017 sounds right because I believe in about a year there, that year span, Darren Daly passed away and Leo passed away.
Oh, wow.
Two bigger than, you know, industry type of figures.
Absolutely.
And I think that helps. You talk about COVID opening eyes. I think both of those really opened a lot of people's eyes in the industry.
And I remember
as to just what are we doing? Why are we at work all the time? There's family outside of it. And until you attend a funeral of somebody that you're really close with and see how their family reacts, and also the other groundskeepers in the room and how big they were, it just changes all of the perspective of it.
It definitely did. And I remember getting the call about Darren, and I was just and thankfully I was able to be involved in, you know, being part of the scholarship. And one thing I do remember about Darren is that he would come speak at Texas Turfgrass. I'd call him like, Darren, come down. And Darren was yes for me every single time I asked him something. That man just always had a smile on his face and was whatever you need. And I remember when we were talking about how we could honor him, I was just like, I think I really believe that I would like to do something like a scholarship, but I didn't want it to necessarily be for a turfgrass, just for anybody that's related to turfgrass. And fortunately, that's kind of what happened. And because that's the way Darren was. Darren would do anything for anybody. And I wanted it to be anybody. And he's just amazing man. But yeah, they were, I think, about a year apart.
Wow.
When that happened.
So you get the job. Now. You're the head groundskeeper. What does that transition look like for you? How much more role did you have to take on there than what you already had? And was Nick already there then? Or did
Yes,
Nick
was there. Yes,
okay.
Nick had come back. But Nick was I guess his title was baseball. More, we called him the baseball field manager is what his title was. So he wasn't truly an assistant. I mean, he wasn't like an assistant athletic field manager, but he was, if you had to put him in a chart, he was number 3 in the chart.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as, I guess, rankings in the chart. And then we had we had gotten to the point where we were getting to where we were hiring students who graduated that wanted to kind of stay around. And so we were starting to get to where we had a person at each facility, but we were still all be together at the big events or especially football. And Nick, by that time, I had gotten to where if it was a baseball game, I wasn't having to be there. But if there was bad weather, then, it's all hands on deck. So, I could kind of watch the weather. And we had Nick there, and then Leo would be at the baseball game as well. So it was myself at soccer, myself at softball, and then whatever crew we needed for that. And then kind of dividing the crews up for baseball. And then everybody's at football on football game day because we had more things to do than just mow the field. We had to set up for TV and stuff like that. So we needed help in that aspect. But that's kind of how that started. And then after Leo had passed away, the one thing I look back on is, and one regret I have, I think, is that I still spent too much time feeling like I needed to be on the field and doing the fertilization and all the spraying. And I guess I didn't have my role where I needed to be more of a manager and more in my office doing some of those things to advance our crew instead of being the guy out there pulling the sled. But that was just tradition. I'd always painted the field as far as the lines and stuff like that. And when we started doing sleds, that's just kind of my stubbornness. I'm like, I got to still do this. And my boss is like, you got to quit doing that. But he's like, I want you in their office. I'm like, but really, I was like, no, if I'm in the office, I miss things. If I'm not out, you still got to get out there and mow every once in a while, even if it's not every day, but you got to get out there and spray your field or paint those lines, in my opinion, because that's how I catch things. If I'm not out there, I don't see it. And maybe I will see something that somebody else doesn't see. But then, those guys would see things and say, Craig, what do you think about this? But it was just something that I felt like I needed to do. So I do have regrets in that. And I think Nick is doing a fantastic job. And I think that he's brought the role that if I went back into it again, then that's kind of the role I would take, is the role that he's doing, because I think it's the way it needs to be done.
So you retired in 21, 22?
20, what is it? 24? Yeah, 22.
Yeah. And now what are you doing?
Now
I'm sure slowing down, playing golf every day, not busy at all. That's the nature of a turf grass professional.
I know. We cross paths quite a bit now.
Airports on trips that we weren't even together at. So
that's amazing.
So I work with Sod Solutions Professional, which is part of Sod Solutions. And so we oversee jobs. If there's a lot of customers that will call. It started with Aaron Wilder, and they call and say, I need to find this grass. Can you help me? And so that's kind of where it's gone, is helping from start to finish, at least finding the grass, finding the farm. If they need a specific soil, knowing where that farm would be that would grow that grass on that soil. Going to, a lot of my deal is especially in the sports part, is going to the farm, meeting the turf manager at the farm, having the discussions. Is this going to work for you? Why will it work? Why it won't work? And then when the installation goes there, to go to the site during installation just to make sure everybody's on the same page. And and things are getting done to the specifications of the customer. Is kind of what my role is right now, and then trade shows. So I'm still part of the industry. It's different. I think, Weston, you'll probably agree with this, that it's different being on the other side
100%.
of the booth. 100%. And I always joke about, people used to really love me when I was an athletic field manager because I have a credit card. And now I'm on the other side of the booth and people really love me because I have a credit card. Do they like me for me, or do they just like me both ways because I have a credit card? So,
amazing.
But it's different going to SFMA as a vendor versus being there as a field manager. It's a totally weird feeling. Yeah. And I still haven't adjusted to that as well as I probably should have.
And
each one gets a little bit easier, but it is definitely a change when you're standing there and you realize, oh, this is the booth I stand at.
Yeah.
No matter where it's at, it's definitely a different feeling. So
it is.
It's awesome. And I know Weston talked a lot about, he had to get out of Texas when he left Austin FC, because he was like, I know I would just, still go and consult or even find myself doing, labor with them. Do you find yourself, since you're still in the area, that you can't get away in some sense and do you like that you maybe have, access to being able to go and walk the field or check in on how things are going? Do you like that you're still kind of locationally involved?
I love that. But by the same token, when I was first thinking about retiring, and I had these conversations with my boss and Nick, and there was kind of a deal, at A&M, I can retire and sit out for a few months and then go back and work 20 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of, the first thought was I would just retire and then I would come back and, whatever Nick needed. If Nick needed me to spray, I'd go spray. If Nick needed me to jump on a mower, I'd jump on a mower, just whatever that was. And Nick was totally cool with that. And I just, over time, I also had this other opportunity with Sod Solutions as well that, I was trying to decide. First, I was trying to decide, am I going to retire? And then second, it was like, if I do retire, which way will I go? Will I go do this, or will I go work for Sod Solutions? And I think that making that choice, it wouldn't have been, at first it was kind of selfish, I guess, in my way, because I wasn't really ready to retire in that aspect. But I knew that I needed to, because it was a 7-day-a-week job still. And I put the stress on me that a lot of times that was me putting stress more than anything else. But I didn't think it was fair to go back. And as I looked at it, I was like, I don't need to be around. I don't need to be, feeling like Nick feels like he needs to do this for me. And I'm sure that's not what he felt. But I just felt like I needed to be kind of step back from it. Now, knowing what I know now, when I retired, we kind of had a big project going on, or we're about to start it, and kind of had some plans and everything, and it was all good. But, as projects go, things change. And so I think maybe that first year, it might have been good for me to stay around, just because I'd been there so long, I kind of knew where everything was buried, so to say.
Yeah, yeah.
That I could have helped Nick out. And he was trying to, at the same time, he was trying to build a new crew. And so he just had a lot on his table that I felt like I could have should have maybe stayed one more year, or been around that first year just to kind of help him out. Just say, yeah, this is over here. There was times where they'd call and say, Craig, do you remember where this is at? And I'd go out there and try to help figure it out. So, but yeah, I mean, I do agree that I love going out there, but it is also a difficult thing. And I've told Nick, it's just hard for me to go back.
Yeah.
I still have only I went to one football game on the sideline with Nick, and then I sat through a half of another football game in the seats. And that's all I've been back. It's just hard because it's just that's been so much part of my life, and now it's not.
Yeah.
And so I look back at it and I'm like, yeah, I used to say I'd love to be out in a tailgate. And now I don't want to go.
Yeah.
It's just weird. It's a weird feeling. But I do like this fact that I am still in the industry. Our ex softball coach, I started in 96 and she was hired. Coach Evans was hired in 1997. So on her interview, when she came down, any coach they brought in, they would have me come out and talk about the field on the tours. So we became friends, and she actually got let go the season. Her last season was the season that I retired. So she finished her season, and I still that was in May or June, and I still hadn't decided if I was going to retire. But if I did, it was going to be in August. And so they hired new coaches and everything. And I finally decided, yeah, this is time. And so I retired. And so then she got the job at University of California, Santa Barbara. And they don't have a grounds crew per se. They have people that mow, but that's it. They don't have people doing the infield. So the players and the coaches have to do all that. And so she called me before their first true season started. And she's like, you think if we flew you out, you could show us how to do the tarps and, just clay, get all the stuff that we need before the game. So I went out there, and the game was on Friday and I landed Thursday. So it's like we did a practice tarp pull, and they're like, well, we'll never need it in California. But turns out the last 2 years, they've needed it a lot.
Nice.
But, so I worked the game, did all the lines, showed them how to clay, showed the girls how to clay, got all the materials that they needed to do that, bought everything, and then went through that. And then the next thing I know, the administrator's like, can you come back next series? So they ended up having 5 home series. So I did all 5 home series. And so each week I'd go out there. Each time they had a home series, I'd get out there a day before and just get everything ready and do everything. So it was great because I was back in it, I'm good again. And it was working with the contractors who took care of the field because it was raining all the time. They're like, how do we dry this out? So I was like, okay, we'll do this. And so then the next year they're like, well, can you do it again? We got 7 home stands. I'm like, we'll do it again. So I did it again, and I just love it. I mean, the only thing I don't like is having to fly to California all the time. But
of course,
I love being out on the field, and I love going to Santa Barbara. Don't get me wrong in that area, but just being a groundskeeper again and being around the team and the kids are just awesome. It's what I miss. And so I still get that side of the world that I really enjoy. So we'll see if we're going to do it year 3 or not. I mean, they should be able to handle it, but it's not fair that your coaches are having to go put lines down between games, especially when they have tournaments and stuff, or the players are having to go repair the mound. They shouldn't have to think about that. So I think that they're trying to hire a couple of people, but it hadn't happened yet. So we'll see what happens next year.
Fingers crossed for you.
Fingers crossed, yeah. I enjoy
it. That's awesome. Weston, I saw you had a few maybe thoughts on the horizon. Nope. Okay.
I'm all good. So,
okay.
The only question I was going to ask him is, are you still hanging out in hotels in Denton, Texas? And Meg, this story is...
Let me tell the story.
Do you want to tell it, or do you want me to tell it? I bet you we probably have 2 different perspectives. What's that?
It was my mess up.
Yeah, but the randomness of it was so much more from my side of it than your side.
Well, you can tell the story and all.
Yeah, let's get your point of view, and then we'll get the facts from Craig.
So in 2018, I was still with the Columbus Crew, but it looked like potentially the team could move to Austin, Texas, and so I was doing recon work to prep for that, and going down and looking at fields and trying to figure out where we play and all that sort of thing. And in one of the trips, I thought, well, we're going to build a stadium, we're going to build a training facility, so I'm going to go look at sod while I'm down here. And I ended up at a sod farm in North Texas, and I had a night to waste until I, either went and saw the field or was flying out that day. I don't know. I went to like a Hampton Inn or some really random hotel in what I thought was like the middle of nowhere. And I'm up in the morning and I'm going to the buffet to eat breakfast, and I look over And I'm trying to do this without anybody seeing me. There is no one that knows that I'm doing this as part of the
Yeah.
project, right? And so the only person that knows I'm down there is the sod farmer who we're both good friends with. And that's it. All of my staff back in Columbus have no idea I'm there. No one knows that I'm there. So I'm trying to keep this extremely quiet. I look over and there's Craig Potts sitting. And I was like, do I say hi? Do I just ignore it? Like, what do I do? Craig looks over and thinks I'm his cousin because apparently I look exactly like his cousin or his nephew or whatever.
Kind of in that area. So,
and so we had the most awkward exchange ever to where he thinks he recognizes me from something else. And I know exactly who he is. And I'm trying to avoid being seen.
Oh my gosh.
So at this hotel in the middle of, I think it was Denton.
I had no idea why you would be there. And I didn't know any of this information. And I see you from a distance, and I'm like, oh, that's Ben. I'm like, hey, Ben. It makes sense that Ben would be there because he lives in the Dallas area. Maybe he has something. Like, what are you doing? And then we kind of realized what was going on. I'm like, oh my God.
Head is down like this, hoping he doesn't see me the entire time I'm down there. I'm like grabbing a plate and heading back to my room. And here he's waving at me like, Ben, what's happening?
At what point were you like, I mean, it had to cross your mind, like, okay, do I play it off as his cousin? Like, you didn't want to be discovered.
I didn't know who Ben was. So I was like, oh, he knows who I am, but he doesn't know my name. Oh my goodness. And, so
that wasn't it. It was just, it never crossed my mind that why would Weston be here? That in a million years, I would have never saw. And I swear to God, you're our spitting image. So,
yeah. So
that's amazing.
Yep. And he was not joking. Like, we run into each other at airports everywhere for conferences we're not even at together. And that was just one of those instances of the middle of nowhere.
Strange run-ins, don't we?
Yep.
Yep. You guys have like magnets. You guys are
exactly.
And now we talk about racking up airline points. We don't talk grass. We're talking about hotel and airline points.
Yeah. Where are you staying at? Did you find any specials?
Exactly.
Well, Weston, I think you need to tell him about your side gig and see if he can be a contributor, a content creator for you.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what your thoughts are on hotel pillows, but now that we travel a lot, I have a take that they all suck. And so I let Megan on a little secret a couple of weeks ago when I was doing this Road to Turk, where I have an Instagram account where I'm trying to shame hotels into providing more diversity in pillows. And so it's become quite interesting and quite the topic when talking with other groundskeepers that do any kind of traveling. I was just texting Dr. Straw a little while ago, and he was giving me crap because my take's wrong, he thinks. So
I love it.
It's funny because that's so true, but I did stay. It was at a Sheraton, and I think Marriott had bought it. And one time I was there, it's been a long time ago, but I was struggling with pillows at home as well. And those 2 nights, I've never slept any better. I mean, it was a pillow. And so I looked at it and I went online, like, can you buy Marriott pillows? And sure enough, I found the exact pillow. I actually asked the front desk what it did. And they're like, yeah, you can buy one. So I was just like, yeah. I still have that pillow to this day. It came from Marriott.
Oh my gosh, that's hysterical.
But now my wife uses it. So I've moved on.
Nice. Well, yeah, I if I can just find like any surface to fall asleep on, that's kind of that's the stage of parenting that I'm at, where it doesn't matter as long as it's like a flat surface that I can lay on, I can fall asleep. Well, Craig, when we introduced the topic, you're like, oh, you want to hear the turf origin story again? Like, okay. And, we figured maybe you had some doubts that we wouldn't have enough to talk about, but now we're an hour in and we've got the full Craig Potts history. I think we can cut it there and maybe do a follow-up about, where life is taking you now or passions that you have throughout the industry.
Sure, I'd love to.
So you're welcome back anytime.
We'll shoot it live from Dallas Fort Worth Airport.
And management and I think things that I've discovered about how to help make decisions and process
Definitely.
like that.
Well, yeah, we
So
would love to
today,
have you back for that.
The biggest deal, and I don't want to get into it much, but right now, but just going from Tifway to Latitude, Latitude Bermuda grass, and I'm sure it's the same way with some of the other varieties, Northbridge, Tahoma, and Iron Cutter, but they're not all the same, and it's a learning process to make each one work the way you want to do. So you can't take your practices necessarily from this grass and put it on that grass. So that's a unique deal. And I think that sometimes we all get caught, well, I know what I'm doing, but I had, it was a big adjustment for me.
Definitely. And I don't know if you heard Weston, but he said that you guys can record the next one at the Dallas-Fort Worth airport. And add your travel tips in there.
No, we need to get Weston down to Corpus this year in December for our Texas turf grass, and we'll do that.
I love it. Sounds like a plan. Signing Weston up for more trips.
Yeah, he'll love it. We're gonna have a big concert, so y'all need to come.
That's cool.
I love it.
Awesome. I'll look at the calendar, so look forward to it.
Alrighty. Well, thank you so much, Craig.
Well, thank you.
And as you mentioned at the start, we will see you in California.
Yeah, we'll be there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You have a great rest of your day.
Going to my softball field after that.
Yep. Yeah, you could make it one-stop shop for that one. I love it. Well, you guys have a great rest of your day.
All right. Bye-bye.